Um, I'm doing this video to sort of remind myself of some things. Um, it's spiritual therapy, healing, and so sometimes what I do is I certainly don't have a problem sharing what I've experienced from what I've learned by what it is that we do performing grid work or healing work, right? Um, so I was listening to a video called it was episode 21/21, so it would be the 21st episode of the Emerald Covenant channel, where Asha Diane and Indigo was talking about. She actually covered some very, very important information. I use the word exposure because I know something about dose response relationships, or epidemiology, or toxicology, right? Or I've used a lot of different words in the past because I could say one word that thus is used within a much larger library of related information to that subject matter, right? So in other words, every word is linked to other libraries of circulation and voltage. So the reason that I experience this as being important is some of my own self-reflection that I've gone through that goes all the way back to when I first became self-aware, and I had this avatar up and running pretty darn fast, according to my mother. Okay? And you're scanning the terrain at a very high rate of speed because you realize and acknowledge with your antenna, your radio set, as a frequency modulator, that you're in a fallen system because you're experiencing the consciousness terrain, which is the planetary consciousness terrain, which is the grid network, which is a communication network of DNA software that is communicating to everyone on a planetary software terrain consciousness grid network. Okay? And so when you acknowledge, right, that you're on fire, right, and you're androgynous, right, then you realize, as I did when I was a child, there were what we call unknown knowns. And if you want to use the word unknown knowns and think of how that word is applied in the intelligence data gathering domain, apply the next word, which is called a targeted individual, because of codes, the codes that folks carry, right? Then you get into the stealth code, and then you get into the Know Me planet, right? Which is a noble healing planet. And you realize, by virtue of who I am at that age, what my mission is, which is, remember, heal mama. Getting mama back up, which means raising the vibration and the frequencies back up to where the lines of communication, which are the lines of communication in frequency modulation between everything that has an antenna that can pick up your frequency modulation, between the smallest unit of consciousness energy to the largest. So that means healing an entire planet. Remember, I covered the stuff about all the bombs going off in Vietnam, what mama must have gone through as a result of experiencing that. Everything that is experiencing war between races, which is control of a grid network, which is a planetary grid network, and then you can simply scale that up to a star system, to a galaxy, to another galaxy, to the universe, and on, right? So when you're processing this, as a small child, you realize that you're sort of like a lone wolf, but you know that you're connected with others, right? Which means you acknowledge I'm connected to the source from which it all began because I'm experiencing eternal love through my own heart and soul, right? So you're naturally in a state of balance. You're naturally in a state of harmony, okay? Which means that the math works. It means that the spirit and the music, which is the spirit and the radio, right? Which is the radio network, which is the star network, which are the gates and all the rest of it, are in harmony. You are naturally in a state of harmony, right? And so they're big jobs, obviously. You know, it was because you're map reading essentially radio sets, radio waves, or if you will, thought forms, emotional patterns, you know, sound and light geographical information systems of math codes, right? Mathematical codex, right? Of the different software systems that are running, biotech operators. So I've mentioned this many times before. I'm measuring resistance. So it becomes a resistance game. But I don't consider it a game because it's very real when you're able to measure essentially how much trauma is actually being held within a planetary memory bank. And I acknowledge that at a small age. My God, you realize how much density has to be cut through to heal that much? So now we're talking about density. Now we're talking about multidimensional and multi-density levels so that we're all experiencing eternal unconditional love throughout the entire universe and galactic template. That was my goal. That's still always going to be my goal. So that wherever we go in living spirit with our soul, we're experiencing what we are, which is what love is. So that's where you're measuring the resistance to experience what that is, which means there's resistance that we're experiencing on a motherboard between resistors and capacitors, if you will. The capacity to experience more love through our heart and our soul, right? At every level of consciousness, right? So I just went through that with my entire body, sending eternal unconditional love to every cell, every neuron, every messenger throughout my entire physical body. And I acknowledged to all of them and began shedding tears, okay, because they have stuck with me all this time, ever since I was a little boy and I came out of my mother's womb, right? And so, you know, this is why she one of the things that she mentioned was maturity, you know, intellectual maturity, mental field maturity, spiritual maturity, or integrity, if you want to call it that way. Because one of the things that happened to me when was this? This was like in the late 1970s when I was going through an academy with a number of other males and a few females in what was called an engineering academy, which is to learn all about hydraulics, how to run an engine. I had to supervise a fire engine crew out on wildland fire with the U.S. Forest Service and all that. And somebody played a practical joke on me. So you know how it is when you put the mirror up, right? You like want to play a joke with me. Well, I'll play a joke on you, see how you like it. Now we're back into the golden rule, right? And so as it turned out, they found it hard to believe that because I was selected, if you will, by another group for me to become a supervisor. Right now I'm back to being a mother and father, remember, with my videos? And they found it highly unusual that I would have reacted the way that I did in a negative way as a result of somebody putting shaving cream, if you will, inside of my sleeping bag. And that particular culprit, and you can understand why and how this works. Okay, remember the example that I used with the Gila Bay Hostel? You know, they don't want love in the building. A being who has, if you will, greater control over the radio set. And so, you know, when you have something that recognizes, because it can read you, and then it knows what it is, and it knows that you're different by virtue of what it's reading, what I am versus what they are, you can see why there would be an attack, because that's exactly what it is. Okay, because I happen to remember who this particular individual was, because I met him 3 years earlier. And so I'm reading his energy field. So when I realized later on, after that incident went down, why that particular individual that I found out was the one who had pulled that practical joke, and why. Okay. If you remember what is known as the Little Lord Fontenoy, what's known as the Little Lord Fontenoy syndrome, because I've experienced it. Those folks, if you're a male, now we're into all the programming, right? Military stuff, Army helmets, Mattel plastic machine guns, the male dominant side. I'm a tough guy, right? Instead of experiencing both the flower side and the seed side, right? Now we're back to balance, what it means to be androgynous. So I've certainly shared through a number of my videos what it's like to having grown up and experienced what it's like to be in very male dominated. You know, I'm a tough guy and all that kind of stuff. Bully atmospheres, environments that are not in balance, and you're having to bite the bullet to maintain your peace, maintain your love, maintain your harmony and your balance at all costs because of the work that you do. You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. So when you get into the emotional body is one of the most important parts of all this to maintain because of how powerful the waves are when you're experiencing emotional energy, whether it's on the positive or the negative side of the magnets. So when that practical joke went down, they felt that it was worthy of them to shell out a couple $100,000 on me to have me go through what was known as a full spectrum analysis. Spectral analysis, which means we're going to look at your emotional body, your mental body, your physical body, and see how you're doing. They thought I was worth it. Okay, that's what they told me. So they sent me up to a place, not uncoincidentally, in wine country in Sonoma, to a place called Deer Park. And the name of the hospital is called St. Helena. So they flew me up there, all expenses paid, put me in the hospital had like a little, almost like a small hotel place where I had my own room. And they were giving me tests every single day that ran the whole gamut. I was taking psychological exams, the MMRP, multiphasic test. I was being interviewed by child psychologists, adult psychologists, and then they ran the whole physical stuff on me, doing physical tests, treadmill, all kinds of stuff. And they came out with a report, right? And so the lady who worked for the U.S. Forest Service main office, where the file was going to be kept and her decision was going to be made on how that was going to affect my future, whether they were going to put me on a probationary period and see how I do behavioral-wise, right? Now, this doesn't take into consideration the other folks that were involved in this, to which nothing else was done. That's not unusual, because if you go to Rockville International and fast forward to like a few years later down the road when I was there and I was targeted there. Okay? I know. Where the lady who actually initiated the reason that they were going to discipline me, they didn't do anything to her, right? You think that's a coincidence? Okay. So, in other words, they left her alone because she was the reason that incident was going to go down the way that it was, to justify it to them to come after me. We don't want living light where the spirit that's experiencing what love is in our factory where the space shuttle is being built, because he's going to expose everything that we're doing, which are all the crimes that we're committing. That's right. They do not want that light in there. That's the bottom line, right? And so this lady for the Forest Service says, I'm going to give you a copy of this. even though I'm not really authorized to let you see portions of this, because you know how things, you got to have a clearance. So on the top of it, she gave me a copy that said, "For your eyes only." This meant this was for only her eyes to see the report, not me. She was honorable enough to let me see this. You think that's a coincidence? So the bottom line in all of that was, she said, this is what the team of psychologists, after all the interviews that they had conducted with me, that they said that this particular spiritual being is able to withstand an enormous amount of emotional trauma and still maintain his state of emotional control. Okay. If you tie that directly into the episode 2121 of the Emerald Covenant with Asha Diane, who talked about this kind of stuff, about maintaining your emotional stability when you're navigating your way through a fallen planetary system, when you're able to experience what everything that is experiencing itself, from the smallest unit of energy to the largest unit of energy that is experiencing trauma. Now, scale that through every software system, if you will, or the entire planetary consciousness terrain, and your ability to maintain your state of love, peace, love, harmony, and balance, right? So I had a very difficult time, not just in my childhood and my early adult years, and cried and beat my own self up for not having done enough, because I believed in my heart and soul I could heal the entire planet, which is to say, heal the entire universe, all of it. Okay? That's a pretty large measurement in measuring my own ability to do that. Because ultimately, don't you think that's a honorable venture? Because any place that we go, we're experiencing trauma or a loss of energy as a result of something that's feeding on our energy, right? Holding energy captive in order to feed on it, right? Now we're back to leashes, collars, and cages, right? That's the battle, is energy capture. Or if you will, control. Control over consciousness energy, from the smallest to the largest, right? So control is the issue. That is the dilemma. And the first time that I realized that control was the dilemma was somewhere between page 400 and 480 in the third edition of Big Books of Alcoholics Anonymous dealt with control. One of being the director of the universe, one of being the director of the play. Remember Shakespeare? Actors. Now you get into masqueraders, Halloween parties, right? Holographic masking technology. Now we're back to my childhood. What are you really? You don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. Pull the mask off. What are you really? Right? I know. So that's called a map read. So you can map read the identity of the operator of the software or the holographic projection screen. Right? So I was doing that at a very young age. Right? And realizing you're not what you look like. You may look like one of me, but you're not one of me. Right? So and that's where we get into the invisible landscape, right? Spirit, weaponizing water, weaponizing fire, right? An opposing force, right? So when the magnets are in perfect balance between one and the other, and you're experiencing being a blast furnace, you're experiencing eternity through your own heart and your oversoul, then you're able to balance, right? The poles, keep the poles in check when you're a mono. So when she talked about targeted individuals and rainbow round tables and indigos and all the rest of it, and the nature of how security works between everyone that's here, and you get into, how that all sort of works and how we finally reached where we're at now. What is this, 2023 now? We made it. Okay. In other words, we were successful. I think I did a video one time some years ago about, well, this would go back actually to the mid 1960s when I was experiencing the energy going up. And I thought, yeah, let's get it up. We're doing it. That means that I'm connected to others on the planet that I know that are doing what they're doing along with what I'm doing. So you become aware of the success that we're having and how long it's going to take to ultimately thus become aware of how successful we are, right? Because it's not going to happen overnight because that's just way too much energy, you know? You know, it is your capacity to handle more and the rate at which you can handle more without burning up, particularly when you're getting into clearing miasma. So now when you get into the miasma body of an individual, then imagine the miasma body of an entire planetary state of consciousness, right? Because ultimately that's what it is to heal everything, right? Yeah. So anyway, it looks like it's a beautiful sunny day out here. Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much to the Guardian materials that you're all putting out there. I share a lot of that stuff with other folks that I'm in contact with to sort of step it up a little bit, right? You know, different, you know, how do we put it? Operating levels, consciousness operating levels, the levels that we operate at, which is based on the software that we're running, the operator, the tech operator, right? Anyway, have a great day. We love you all. Be good to yourselves.